Hello. Russian petrochemicals are one of the fastest growing sectors of the Russian economy, and they are once again the subject of our attention. Today we are talking to Dmitry Alexandrovich, CEO of the consulting company Implementa, about the prospects of Russian petrochemical companies in the context of the situation on the world markets. Hello, Dmitry Alexandrovich. Hello.
Хотелось бы начать с обозначения внешнего контура. В последние кварталы ведущие мировые экономики вступили.
In recent quarters, the world's leading economies have entered a period of slowing economic growth. In the EU and especially in Germany, there is an industrial recession which extends to petrochemical industry, which is losing competitiveness due to expensive raw materials.
В связи с проседанием
With the European producer subsidence, what is the regional configuration of the market? Let's start with the fact that this subsidence, the subsidence of the overall macroeconomic situation and the subsidence of the petrochemical industry, is very irregular. And for different countries, it manifests itself in completely different degrees. In particular, petrochemicals, or let's put it this way, the chemical industry in general. Of course, Europe suffered first of all, because Europe does not have its own huge market. Europe does not have its own resource supply. Accordingly, last year we saw, and the year before we saw how some enterprises first started to unload, some stopped. What kind of production facilities stopped? Large tonnage, oriented on large consumption of resources. It happens that not only entire production facilities, but also individual chains stopped. And that is why companies are adjusting and moving in a new direction. Europe, on the other hand, is still strong in low-tonnage chemistry, in specialty chemistry, in specialty brands, and because development has been going on there and is still ongoing. On the other hand, the US and China. The USA is a major consumer and producer of energy resources. Chemistry is still developing there, and large capacities are still being installed. China is an interesting story, because it is a very large consumer market in itself, and they are constructing new production facilities for this market. And at the moment, they are declared such plus or minus reliable, about 100 million tons of ethylene capacity per year. More than half of them are in China, which operates on the domestic market. Therefore, as far as the general global situation is concerned, China remains a reliable importer of polyethylene, but not for all plastics. That is why it is no longer possible to claim that there is China and we will send everything we construct there. And Europe, as far as I understand, is starting to lose some competitiveness because of the high cost of raw materials. In the expert community, there is quite a common view that there is an overcapacity of petrochemical facilities that were established in the previous period. Do you agree with this position? Absolutely. You can look at the statistics. You can call it utilization. You can call it overcapacity over demand. And it has been growing steadily for the last 5 years. There were a number of effects related to the postponement of commissioning due to the COVID that occurred. Some projects have slowed down, but they have not stopped. In general, there are a lot of projects announced, and they are announced in locations, drivers of the world economy, developing economies. The supply that will be utilized is created there. But in general, the utilization of large tonnage capacity will decrease. So those who are competitive will remain in the market. In the context of this situation, with fluctuations in demand, with a certain slowdown in economic growth, with sanctions, how does the Russian petrochemical industry fit into this particular situation, especially under such sanctions restrictions? There has been a very interesting effect. I honestly did not expect it in 2022. Some of our chemical capacities have actually been unloaded because there was nowhere to supply. Ammonia production went down because our export channels were cut off. Methanol production has also declined because, again, export infrastructure is no longer available. The transport route is very long. But chemistry, if you look at the 2022-2023 statistics, in 2022, it was not import substitution, but production was reoriented to the domestic market. In 2023, we saw a significant increase in consumption of large plastics in the domestic market. For example, polyethylene almost increased by 500,000. This was the replacement of foreign producers who left. There was an interesting configuration. Everyone adjusted to each other, managed to come to an agreement. Producers started to develop new products, new brands, some products with new qualities. And consumers, realizing that they have a limited set of products, also rearranged, adjusted, and restructured their production to fit the products available to them. Our largest petrochemical producer, Sibur, can be singled out because they have restructured even the internal structure of the company, as they announced. They used to have divisions for different types of products, but now they have a business built around different types of consumers. And from the point of view of adapting to sanctions, in terms of obtaining equipment, materials, reagents which are not produced in the Russian Federation and are prohibited for import today, how do petrochemical companies solve this position? It is difficult to solve. Are parallel imports common in the petrochemical industry? Everything is available. There is a set of quite limited tools. Well, each tool itself is quite broad. It is clear that these are alternative suppliers. These are parallel imports. There are domestic productions that are now being established. At conferences, I sometimes hear manufacturers say, "We have found out that there is a small company somewhere that produces some catalysts, and they fit our needs." And before, we just didn't even know about it. In fact, the sectoral communication was probably underdeveloped. But now, since everyone is working on the same problem, solutions are found. It is clear that these solutions are, firstly, more expensive, and secondly, they may not be as effective. For example, a catalyst used to have one time and a new catalyst has a different time. But nevertheless, it should be noted that production has not yet come to a stop. That's on the plus side. Let us now add a little bit. I will add the minuses, a little bit of reality. Only 2 years have passed. Many plants have approached 2022 with a stock of equipment, reagents and catalysts. Some of them have just come out of repair, and repairs are not yet relevant to them. In other words, companies continue to work. They understand the risks. They share their experience with each other. But it is impossible to say that all the problems have been solved. There is still work to be done. As you know, earlier the Russian Federation announced the implementation of several large tonnage projects. How are they being prepared for commissioning? It is known that Nizhnekamsk Neftekhim is ready to commission its Adalan 600 project. As far as I remember, it was supposed to be commissioned in the beginning of 2025. In general, will the company meet these deadlines? Well, I cannot speak for the company. It is probably better to check with the company. I would like to present a general industry vision, because one way or another, we are in communication with all companies. The first fork in the road. What was the status of the project until 2022? If the status was conditionally only at the design stage, this is one story. But if it was not at the design stage, but already under construction, how deep did you manage to go into this very construction? In other words, companies have projects for which all the equipment has almost been delivered. or is about to be assembled. In general, such projects are completed plus or minus the deadlines. It is clear that there are some delays, but it is normal. They are progressing. There are also projects that were at the beginning of construction and for which final investment decisions were made. And then our former partners said to them, "That's it. We won't deliver anything. We won't return the money." As a result, they already have part of the equipment, but they don't have the other part. They don't have the support for the equipment, and therefore they have to somehow redesign, i.e. reconfigure the project that is already underway. This is probably the most difficult thing to do, because how to use the capex that has already been incurred to their advantage. Another type of project is projects that have just been in the design phase. Of course, they are in a difficult situation now, because they have to order everything at once. But nevertheless, they can adjust to new suppliers, new licensors, and in general, they do just that. Most of these projects, as far as I understand, were export-oriented, which has shrunk very much due to sanctions and the current geopolitical situation. In this regard, how well do you think they are supported by external and domestic demand today? Firstly, domestic demand is developing. Domestic demand can be further developed, and it should be done. That is, companies should work more with consumers. The second point is about exports. Well, all the big markets are still available to us. China. It may not be the fastest growing, but it's still very large. And it's also going to remain a net importer of many products for a while. India, which is perceived as the future China, is also very debatable whether it can pull off this miracle. Southeast Asia, which now provides the highest dynamics of demand for plastics in general, in some countries there is just 5-6 growth per year. Africa, South America, all these markets are available to us. And in principle, there are niches in these markets, and we can sell there. It is known that the recent trend is the expansion of production of low-tonnage complex polymers, various plastics.
Различных пластиков вторичных, вот о чем, значит, вы сказали.
How does a Russian petrochemical company fit into this trend? If we focus our attention, where do we fit into these chains?
Вклиниваемся в эти цепочки.
We fit in and cut in, because we have no other choice. Because, in fact, our country needs a fairly wide range of plastics. Because cups have to be made from one, bags from other, bottles from a third, sports bottles from a fourth, and car parts from a fifth, and so on. So this is a trend. Yes, only until 2022. What was our problem? We did not have enough demand, and therefore many products were not produced. Now, as a matter of fact, well, firstly, there is a domestic market, which simply has nowhere to get alternatives for some items. And secondly, in general, the trend is that if you produce large products, large tonnage products for the world markets, but these large tonnage products get into the most competitive segment. That is, prices are constantly under pressure there. There are a lot of projects. And it is not where demand is growing. Demand is growing just in these particular brands, special segments. That is why companies are working in special segments, implementing or working out at least projects and doing so, because there is simply no other way now. It is necessary to do this.
Вот в нынешней геополитической ситуации.
In the current geopolitical situation, do Russian producers still have the opportunity to expand into foreign markets by, say, setting up joint ventures in the CIS zone in order to somehow avoid sanctions and expand their supplies abroad? Is this trend being observed today? Is it still in place, or is it also limited due to the possibility of secondary sanctions?
Скажем так, насколько я
Let's say
вижу,
that, as far as I can
тенденция
see, the
сохраняется,
trend is still in
просто об
place.
этом
It's
мало
just
говорят
that
сейчас.
not much is being
Как раз
said
по
about it
поводу
now,
риска вторичных
precisely
санкций.
concerning the risk of secondary
Компании
sanctions.
работают, компании
Companies work,
взаимодействуют.
companies
В принципе,
interact,
это очень логично.
and in principle,
Даже вот
this is very
с
logical.
точки зрения
Even
того,
from the
что
point of view that
наш
supplies of our
подход,
energy
наших
resources have been
энергоресурсов,
reoriented,
они
understandably,
переориентировались,
to other
понятно, на
countries.
другие страны,
Latin America,
там,
Africa,
Латинская Америка,
Asia
Африка,
Pacific.
АТР. Эти же страны
These countries are also potentially
являются
fast-growing
такими
countries in terms of
потенциально
consumption of petrochemical products.
лидерствующими в области потребления нефтехимической продукции. Поэтому, например, вместо поставки
Therefore, for
нафты
example,
можно
instead of
тот же
supplying
АТР
naphtha to Asia
инициировать
Pacific,
проект
it is possible to initiate
по
projects to process
переработке
this naphtha
нафты,
into
например,
petrochemicals, for example. What
Какие
are the
предпосылки
prerequisites for
создаются?
this?
Во-первых, у российских
Firstly, Russian
компаний есть
companies
доступ
have
к
access to this
дорогому
inexpensive raw material.
своему, да, у нефтяников может быть. У российских
Some Russian oil
нефтекомпаний есть
companies
опыт
have
реализации
experience in
нефтяных
implementing
проектов,
large
в том числе
projects,
нефтехимических.
including petrochemical projects.
Этого опыта
Many
можно
Indian
использовать в
companies
других
may not
индийских
have this
странах. С другой
experience.
стороны,
And on the other
в
hand,
Китае,
India,
Вьетнаме,
China, Vietnam,
где-то
Malaysia,
Малайзии, в
different
разных странах
countries may have
по-разному,
differently limited
в принципе,
experience and lack of energy and
ограниченный
resources,
этот
but at the
опыт
same
и
time a large
отсутствие
demand,
доля
a large
ресурсов, но при
market.
этом большой
And
спрос,
accordingly,
большой
the
рынок.
implementation of such projects in
Соответственно,
general
реализация
will
таких
make it possible to
проектов
diversify and
может
reserve a piece of the market for Russian
кусочек
companies.
рынка за российскими компаниями.
So, in your
Такая
opinion, this
возможность
possibility still
сегодня
exists today.
по-прежнему существует.
It does exist,
Возможно, существует.
and
Более
moreover,
того,
we
надо
must move in this direction.
Последний вопрос, Дмитрий
One
Александрович.
last
Как вы
question,
видите
Dmitry Alexandrovich.
перспективы
How do you see the prospects of the petrochemical industry next year and at the end of this year? What can we say for the domestic market? Well, probably the growth will cool down a little bit, because the numbers are double-digit. This is a non-standard story, such a one-off probably.
Такая разовая, наверное, достаточно. То есть рынок немножко
That is, the market has restructured a little bit, and it is good that it has restructured. But nevertheless, as some new projects continue to be worked out between the producer and the consumer, there will certainly be the growth, and it will probably continue. The industry can grow faster than GDP. That is the first point. The second point is that new projects have to be worked out, and there are three components there that are critical. The first component is the technique of the technology. The second point, which is really limiting the growth of the industry right now, is the financing rate. This is a real barrier for many companies. It is discussed at all conferences that there are a lot of projects in Russia that have been worked out, but they could have been realized at the old rate level. And now, unfortunately, it is 20+%. This is a killer for almost any project. And in chemistry, there has never been such profitability. The industry is now living in a new world. These are new consumers with new rules of operation. Again, many companies are sharing their experience of how they are entering these new markets that operate under completely different rules. It's a market factor, getting into the market at the right time and in the right place. It has been very important for chemistry before. Market risk is key, in fact, for chemistry. And now it is not very important, it is very critical. And to understand how to sell, to whom and when, this is important to do right at the very early stage. These three components, technology, financing, and the market. We have decided we can do it. Thank you.